Management to introduce Mr. Teja.
Good evening, everyone. It is a great honor to introduce our esteemed guest, Mr. B. Ravi Teja. Sir is an electronics engineer from National Institute of Technology, Allahabad, and an MBA from School of Management, IIT Bombay, with specialization in manufacturing and technology management. He is Vice President for Nihilant's Global Consulting Businesses and Country Head for the company's India operations. He has over 16 years of consulting experience and heads the company's Enterprise Transformation Group. Sir's team provides consulting services to global organizations in the areas of strategy execution, e-governance, learning, innovation, knowledge, and performance management. Sir has led a number of projects worldwide at State Bank of India, Sasol, Tata Teleservices, GE, Kellogg, Nedbank, Barclays Bank, South African Revenue Services, among others in the USA, UK, Japan, South Africa, and India. Sir has helped organizations to execute their strategy using tools such as Balanced Scorecard, Process Redesign, ERP, CRM, CAD/CAM, and GIS using IT products such as Siebel, SAP, Microsoft, and Intergraph. He has spoken at various management conferences around the world such as Knowledge Management Institute Africa, Institute of Management Consultants of India, Bombay Chambers, Computer Society of India, etc. He has taught knowledge management at WITS Business School in South Africa. Sir is a student of ontology and has completed his curriculum for Living from Landmark Education. May I now invite our honorable guest, Mr. B. Ravi Teja, to share his experiences. Sir, the podium is all yours. Thank you.
I stand between you and your home, or your hostel, or your dinner. Correct? I like the energy at the end of the day. I believe you all started at 7:30 in the morning. That's quite impressive. And the questions never ended for the previous speaker. So compliments to the previous speaker and compliments to all of you. Yes, should I shorten my interaction today? I need to go back home. I told my wife I'm going to start at 6, finish at 7 and come back home by 8. I can't do that. So I have to honor my commitment. Okay, but without reducing the value of what I can provide you today, I'll try to shorten it, okay? All I can probably not be assured of is I'm sure you will have a lot of questions which I can't shorten. Okay, we're going to do the topic is unfortunately not related to telecom. Is that okay? Yes, is that fine? Yeah, it's called CEO Vision to Reality. You know, we work with I work with Nihilant. A lot of Balaji students joined us, and you will see a glimpse of what they do in Nihilant for our clients. So what we do is we help CEOs of a lot of organizations, including, by the way, educational institutes, on how do we convert their dreams, their vision into reality. Do all of you have dreams? Yeah. I just met a girl whose name meant dream. Okay. Yeah. So I asked my daughter, she's 14 years old, what's your dream? And she said, Papa, I don't get dreams. So I said, dreams are not what you get when you sleep. Dreams are what keeps you awake. Okay. So I'm sure a lot of such dreams keep most of you awake, and especially people who head organizations, people who are CEOs, people such as Bala sir, even at this age, he has a dream. I'm sure a lot of it has been converted to reality, but he continues to have more dreams. And that's what keeps him awake at night. Now the challenge is all of us do have these dreams, but not many of us are able to convert that into reality. The statistics worldwide is not very good. 80% of good visions or good dreams or good strategies are not getting executed on the ground. That's a global statistic. So 80% of strategies lose out in action. The type of consulting that we do is we help such companies, help organizations who have these dreams and strategies and visions to convert it into action. Because that's where the realization of the dream happens. And that's why the topic today is how do we convert CEO's vision into reality? Is that an interesting topic? Yes, do all of you aspire to become CEOs? Yes, all of you become CEOs who will work for you. Who's that? Other business schools people? Yeah, okay, yeah, I just say forward. Sorry. How do I use this? Is this for up and down or no?
Yes, sir, it has come.
Yeah, I know, but how do I move to the next slide?
I think.
Yeah, okay, this one. Okay. Okay, the first thing is how do we communicate our dreams? It's important that in organizations, especially where we have a 50 people organization, a 100 people organization, or 1,000, and in some cases, more than 100,000 people in organizations, it's important that dreams are not just with the CEO, it's actually shared. Since you're doing your MBA, if you have a class on strategic management, dreams are supposed to be shared visions. Have you heard of shared visions? Yeah, I'm going to make it a bit interactive. And I see you're trained to be saying yes very loudly. Okay, so which is nice. Good. It's a good encouragement to the speaker. Yes. So shared visions are very important. It's important to communicate your dream to entire organization. Have you heard of organizations having vision, mission, and value statements? Does Balaji Institute and the group of institutes, do you have a vision, mission, and value statement? Does anyone remember? Okay, since you don't have a mic, most of you are speaking, so I trust that you remember. Okay, a lot of organizations have vision, mission, and value statements, but they don't really mean anything except to the CEO who actually created it. They don't mean anything for the rest of the people in that company, in that organization. For the way you have responded of what your vision and mission statement, I get a feeling that you have a lot of meaning. You attach a lot of meaning to your own vision and mission statements. But the question that we ask is, because in most organizations, they have these statements because, you know, if you have a company, you need to have a vision statement. You need to have a mission statement. That's basic. And then, you know, write down a piece of nice little sentence and get on with the job. I'll ask you to, you know, once you leave the auditorium today, I'll ask you to Google on 10 random companies on their vision and mission statements, and I'll ask you to come back and tell me what are the critical words that you'll find. And if I ask you, what would those words be in vision and mission statements? Most are forward-looking, okay? Success. Yeah, unfortunately I'm not able to hear you, but values. No, no. What are the words that you'll find in vision statements? That's my question. So people say, yes, my organization is creative, innovative. We are the most customer-centric. We are employee-centric. We are a learning organization. So these are common words that you'll find in random organizations, and we are not very sure whether they mean it. The question is, why do organizations need to have vision and mission statements? Do you know? Why do we need to have vision and mission statements? It gives a direction to the organization. I have my own view. I was just introduced that I am a student of ontology. Does anyone study this science called ontology? Anyone heard of this science called ontology? No? Sorry? Insects. I'm sure I'm not a student of insects. Okay, so ontology is a science of being. And you see that? I've used the word being. You know the word to be? Yeah, to be. I am, you are, we are, they are. That's the verb, to be, to exist. Human beings, we call ourselves human beings, right? Yes? Yes, but I say we are not human beings. We are human doings. We are not human beings, we are human doings. And the reason why I say that is, whenever I'm encountered with a challenge or a problem, the first thing that comes to my mind is, what should I do? We are in the action mode. मुझे क्या करना है? What should I do? And because what we do as consulting is we help organizations change and transform. Each organization has a dream, and that dream is typically a 3, 5, 10-year, and if it's a country, it's a 20-year, 25-year dream that the country has. So the fact that it's a 5, 10, 15-year dream means I'm still not there. I'm here today, and I need to traverse a journey which is 15 years from now, which means I need to change and transform my organization. Okay? So how does true transformation actually happen? Whether it is personal transformation, whether it is organizational transformation. So how does this actual transformation happen? And I believe transformation happens from a state of being. Okay? So you need to get this, because the importance of vision and mission statements of organizations will be just understood. So what did I say? We are human beings or doings? Okay, we are human doings. Okay, so if you want to transform, the transformation doesn't happen at the action level. The transformation doesn't, we cannot alter our actions. Our actions are actually dictated by who I am, or who am I being. Okay. I want to give you an example. The example is this. If I am being happy, what would I do? What would I do? I'll smile. I'll party. I'll dance. I'll jump. I'll sing. Okay? So if I ask somebody in this audience to come up here, stand up here and do a dance, will you be able to do that? Yes or no? Yes. I'll truly call up somebody and ask you to dance here. Okay. So I'm assuming that it's a difficult thing, okay? Now, who's that scientist called? Was he Archimedes, who actually invented something and then ran out, Eureka, and ran out naked? Yes? Okay. That's a difficult thing to do, right? We can't just do that. If I ask you, any one of you, to go and slap your neighbor, a lot of you did, huh? At least to prove me right, don't do it. Okay, the proposition I'm trying to make is this, that my actions are dictated by who I am. So if I am happy, I'll smile. If I am happy, I'll dance. If I'm sad, I'll sulk. If I'm sad, I will cry. So you can't change people's actions. If you want to change people's actions, then you need to change their state of being. Is that fair to say? Yes. So, you know, I have a child, a son who's 9 years old. He plays with other children, and of course he fights with them, and then the parents come and complain to us, and what do I need to tell my child? Go and say sorry. Okay? So I have to almost force him to say sorry to the other, you know, to his friend of his. And if I force him, how will he say sorry? Sorry. You know, he doesn't mean it. Is there a difference between being sorry and saying sorry? Yes. If you're being sorry, do you actually need to say it? Can I see it on your face that you're actually being sorry? A lot of employees, staff in banks are asked and forced to smile at customers. So have you ever entered a bank branch where the staff there, or the tellers, or the customer service agents have a plastic smile? So are they actually smiling, or do they mean it? Yeah, they have a plastic smile. Okay, so if you actually mean, if you're actually being customer centric, even if you don't smile, you can actually see it on people's faces. So I just want to talk about 3 things that organizations have. Yes. So the definition of mission in organizations is, mission means reason for existence. Why do I exist? Have you heard of missionaries? Have you heard of jihadis? They have a mission. They can die for anything. Although the meaning is to exist, reason for existence, for that existence they can actually die. So to exist is a synonym, or is a synonym to a verb called to be. The definition of vision in organizations is, what do I want to be, say 10 years from now? So what do you want to be? So to be is an operating word. So the fact that organizations define mission and vision statements is, they want to define the reason for existence. They want to define, what do you want to be 10 years from now or 5 years from now. So everyone wants to create a change agenda or a transformation agenda at the being level, because the only transformation can happen at the being level. True sustaining change can only happen at the being level, and we just discussed why. You know, so that's the importance and strategic importance of mission and vision statements. They are not just pure statements, because once you define as an organization that you want to be customer centric, then all actions in organizations, you will see that they are actually customer centric. You don't need to tell people that you need to smile. You will not see plastic smiles in organizations. So that's how important being in organizations is. And ontology is actually a science of being. And Google it once you go back to your hostels and see what that science actually means. So a lot of organizations you'll relate to here, they define their reason for existence in one word. So some examples are here. 3M, all of us will agree that, you know, that one word is innovation. Starbucks, it's escape. For Nihilent, that one word is change, because what we do is we help our clients trigger change or manage change. If I ask you, your company, and in your company is actually an institute which is Balaji Institute, if you need to describe your institute in one word, what will that be? Discipline. Yeah, I can see that. Yeah, I can see hard work. I can see discipline. So these are words that actually define your reason for existence. You exist because of such reasons. Nihilint exists because we want to create change. The definition of vision is that what do you want to be for, say, in a certain time period. A vision statement should have 3 key things. And when you go back, look at your Balaji vision statement and go back to Bala sir and say, we just heard about how a good vision statement is, and it should pass a 3-point criteria. The 3-point criteria is, the first is it should have a very stretched goal. Okay, it should have a quantified stretched goal. Did you ever hear of BHAG? Big, hairy, audacious goals? There's a gentleman called Jim Collins who talked about big, hairy, audacious goals. So, a good vision statement has a quantified stretched goal. So take example of Balaji Institute. The quantified stretched goal could be, we want to be the #1 management and technology institute in the world in terms of placements, as an example. #1 in terms of placement. That means we get 100% placements in the top 10% of the companies in the world. Is that a big, hairy, audacious goal? Do you already do it? Yeah, the stretched goal is that you are not there yet. Okay, so that's the stretched quantified goal. What's the quantification part of it? You're #1. Then there's a definition of niche. You're #1 in what? So in terms of, say, placements in the management and technology institutes. Okay, so that's the definition of niche. And then it should have a time horizon by 2020. If you have these 3 criteria passed in any vision statement, you think, you can be fairly confident that this is a good vision statement. Otherwise, we call vision and mission statements as lip service. They don't mean anything. They just need to be there because somebody asked them to create it. Okay, so am I making sense? Yeah. So why I'm telling you all this is the students that we have recruited from Balaji Institute who work with us, we actually help CEOs worldwide to redesign and redefine and recreate their mission, vision and value statements to begin with. And why do we need to create vision and mission value statements? Because the way they're defined, because they are at the state of being, the true transformation of organizations only happens at the state of being and not at the state of doing. My actions are dictated by who I am. I can't change my actions on their own. They would look superficial. Unless if I am a great actor, I can do actions without, I can actually jump and dance although I am sad. That can only happen if I am a good actor. A lot of organizations have something called core values. I don't know if Balaji Institute has, but core values are something that are non-negotiable. I'll say that I want to do business, but these are the 3 things that are core to my organization. If somebody violates this core value, we will fire that person, however senior that person is. And if I look at your own institute, some of the core values could be discipline, could be hard work. Anyone who's not disciplined, I'm sure, however senior that person is, would be treated with a lot of, yes? Is that fair to say? Yes. So a lot of organizations probably have a laundry list of core values and they don't mean anything. So you need to action those core values by defining that this is your personality. You will fire somebody for violating it, and even if there is a financial impact, you will take that financial impact. Why I'm telling you this is these are the 3 things that any organization defines for itself. And there is a lot of meaning to it because those define how you're going to perform or change in the future. The next thing is, how do we set those breakthrough targets? Okay. I don't know if it happens in India, but in Africa, where I've done a lot of travel, A gazelle is like a deer. Have you heard of a gazelle? Yeah, it's like a deer. So every morning in Africa, a gazelle wakes up. It knows that it must run faster than the fastest lion, or it will be eaten up. It must and the lion also wakes up, it knows that it should outrun the slowest gazelle. So it doesn't matter whether you're a gazelle or a lion, in today's world, all of us have to wake up and run. Is that fair to say? We all have to wake up and run. So it doesn't matter, even if you're a lion, you just can't sit and say, the prey will come to you. Business is like compound interest. Overnight success takes a hell a lot of time. Okay. When we create financial goals, if I ask mostly private sector companies, they exist to make their shareholders make a lot of money. That's the core goal of any private sector organization. If it's an NGO or a non-government organization, they have, or a government organization, they have a citizen purpose, they have a purpose, they have a social purpose, where the objective is not to make money. But in private sector, the key objective is, I need to make enough profits so that my shareholders are happy. When I make my financial goals as key things, there are two things to financial goals. Do you know which is the #1 company in the world in terms of revenues? ExxonMobil, Walmart. Okay. Okay, which is the #1 IT services company in the world? IBM? Yes. Which is the #1 IT services company in India? TCS. Okay. So every organization has a top line revenue goal where you have to grow the business from a revenue perspective. That's where the growth strategy comes from. But at the same time, I should have revenue, but I should make a lot of profit. That's where the productivity strategy comes into picture. The productivity strategy says that if I make more with less money, I'm actually more profitable, which means that I'll make my shareholders very happy. It's important that organizations have cash. Why do I need cash in my company? So that I pay salaries. I have employees. I've got 10,000 employees and I need to pay salaries for them. So cash is extremely important, and especially if you're a growing company, you need it. The growth actually sucks a lot of cash. The focus is on DSO. Do you know what DSO means? Daily sales outstanding. That means if I have provided a product or a service to my customer, in how much time does he pay me? Does he pay me in 30 days, 40 days, 60 days, 90 days? Typically, what's the payment terms and conditions of clients? In how many days are they expected to pay? A month? 30 days? Okay. So if you have a client who pays you in 30 days, and if you have a vendor whom I need to pay, client pays me in 30 days, in how many days should I pay my vendor? 60 days? That's not fair, right? Your client pays you in 30 days and you pay your 21 days? 45 days. Okay, which one should be more? The client pays me in 30 days and I pay my vendor in 20 days. Is that a good scenario? Bad scenario, right? Yeah. So I need to keep cash as much as possible. And so I can't be this nice guy that my client pays me in 60 days and I pay my vendor in, say, 10 days. It's not a nice situation to be in. Correct? Yes. So we need to very clear that cash is extremely important. The second key thing is, have you heard of a concept called strategy? What is the definition of strategy? Plan of action. Okay. What else? Long-term goals. Yes. Strategy, you know, I'll give you my definition, but you can see what my definition could be. Just this particular example is that this is a picture of a barren land. So in terms of very bad circumstances, we can still have an organization that's blooming. So in this case, there is a flower that still is blooming and is winning in a extremely difficult situation. So in terms of recession, in terms of, in times of recession, a lot of organizations might fall. And I'll tell you what those organizations which will fall. But some organizations will continue to win, although the times are recessionary and the times are bad. Great companies, and you might have examples of great companies. Great companies aren't the best at what they do. They are the only ones that do what they do. Do you have examples of such companies? Sorry? Apple. It's the only company that does what it does. Toyota, Honda, so Harley Davidson. Yes. So strategy is a simple definition of strategy. If any organization has a strategy, they need to answer just one question. How am I different? How does my company differentiate itself in the marketplace? How do my customers see me differently? What is my promise that is different to my customers than my competitors? You will be surprised, a lot of organizations worldwide cannot answer this question. They don't know how different they are. I don't know if you are surprised, but we have seen a lot of organizations who cannot. They all say they have strategies, but you ask them a question, how are you different from your competitors? Then they actually fail. So just to give you an example, how do organizations, a differentiation can be a voluntary promise that I promise my clients. Did any of you who has never flown, who has never sit in an aircraft? You never sit in an aircraft? Okay. Do you plan to? Yes. So if I don't have enough money and if I need to fly from Pune to Delhi, which airline would I fly? You'll fly the cheapest airline. What's the promise of the cheapest airline? The promise of the cheapest airline is that I'll take you from Pune to Delhi. I'll not give you anything to eat. I will not pamper you with a lot of luxury. All I promise is that if you only have 500 rupees, I'll take you cheapest. I'll not give you any bells and whistles. And the only other promise is if I take off, I'll land. Correct? Because that promise is also important. You can't have airlines not promising that. That's given. But its promises that if you want to fly, I'm the cheapest. That's the promise. So if you don't have enough money, you'll fly such airlines. But if you want to get pampered, you want nice food, you want nice lounges, which airline would you fly? Jet Airways, Emirates, or there was some airline at some point of time called Kingfisher. Okay. So airlines such as Emirates, Singapore Airlines, Jet Airways, their promise to their clients is, we'll pamper you, but we are not the cheapest. Okay? They don't come the cheapest. We are not the cheapest, but you'll fly luxury even though you fly economy class. Do you know of an airline which says we are almost 100% on time? Okay. So somebody is saying Indigo, they claim that they are 99.99% on time. Sorry. Southwest Airlines. Okay. So this airline says that if you have a meeting at 10 o'clock at Delhi, I will ensure that I'll land exactly either before that or just, it doesn't matter, I'll never be late, even if the Prime Minister is supposed to board my flight and he's late, I'll take off. Okay? So every airline company has a differentiation. They have a promise that is different from their competitors. Some is competing on cost, someone is competing on customer service, somebody is competing on turnaround time or fast or speed, somebody else is competing on something else. Okay? What is Indian Airlines competing on? Do they have a differentiation? Does Indian Airlines have a differentiation? Culture? What? They have a bad culture? Indian culture. Okay. I'll tell you what Air India, sorry, it's not Indian Airlines, Air India, what does it compete on? It has a social obligation because it's a national airline. Now, if there is an airport in this country, however small that airport is, you are assured that Air India will fly there. Is that correct? All other airlines will work out commercial and economic benefits of flying to a certain airport. But Air India would not do that because they have a social obligation. Okay? So if you live in a village, your parents live in a village, and if there is an airport there, let's be assured that at least Air India will fly. So each company has to have a promise that is different, and you have to then live up to that promise. Okay? So what have we learned? True transformation happens at the being level. That's where vision and mission comes into picture. You need to define your core values so that you don't violate them and you can fire people for that. You need to define your stretched and audacious goals. If you're a private sector company, then they are in terms of financials and customer related. And then you need to define your promise to your clients. That promise has to be different, and then you have to live up to that particular promise. And if I ask you one difficult question, your Balaji Institute's promise to its students or to the other stakeholders, who are your other stakeholders? People who come on campus and recruit. Okay? What is Balaji Institute's promise which is different from other institutes? Do you want the faculty to go away? Yeah? Quality? Quality of the students, is it? Yes. I'll tell you what your promise is because I have experienced the students whom we have recruited from here. Can I tell you? Yeah. You all work from 7:30 in the morning till 9:30 in the evening, and you do the same when you join us. Okay? We have to drag you out of our offices and ask you to go home. Okay? Which is nice, right? So what we've done is that we have defined that it's important that when we are setting up a company or we have a company, we have this differentiated promise. And just one warning that a lot of us think that customers only buy on price. This differentiation thing doesn't really exist. Does anyone in this room uses an iPhone, an Apple iPhone? Yes? Yeah. So see a lot of rich people here who use iPhones paying almost double the price for functionality that is half the functionality that would exist in an Android phone. And by the way, I'm one of them. So we are, we as customers sometimes behave like idiots. We pay double the price for half the functionality. So what it actually demonstrates is that price is not the only criteria on which customers actually buy. And a lot of people think that, especially salespeople, say that I couldn't sell this product because the customer wants to buy cheap. Price is not the criteria. It's one of the criteria, but it's the last criteria. So especially if you want to compete on cost, just beware. Do you know of a company, of a retail company that competes on cost? Do you know of a company that competes on cost? You've heard of Walmart? It says cheapest prices every day. So it doesn't matter and what hour, what day, it promises you that if you come into a Walmart store, you'll get it cheapest. If they find that there is a cheaper price anywhere else, they actually give it free of cost. Okay, but just want to give you one company. There's a company in the US called Kinko's. The CEO used to ask his store managers if any of their customers complained about prices. And if the answer was no, his response was, then why don't you raise them till the time they start complaining? You know, it's good to, yes, you have to be cautious, but it's also rewarding to get a decent price. Okay? So people who think that cost or price is the only thing that customers buy on, if customers are not complaining, this person who's the founder of Kinko said, try raising it till the time they start complaining so that you know what's that optimum price at which you buy. So cost is not always a differentiator for everyone. All of us would have heard burgers at McDonald's. Yes. When you promise something to a client, it's important that we have to live up to that promise. And what is McDonald's promise? Wherever you have this burger, anywhere in the world, it tastes the same. And then when you go there and stand in front of the teller of a burger, of a McDonald's outlet, they give that burger almost in a few minutes, right? Seconds or minutes? Yeah, their promise is speed. So you don't, if you are really hungry, you don't need to wait a lot. The burger and the chips and the Coke or whatever, Pepsi comes very fast. Have you heard of KPI? What's KPI? Yeah, it's key performance indicator, although I have mentioned it something different. So since I'm in the whole mode of promising to clients, the way McDonald's defines KPI is kept promise indicator. Okay, so they have a promise to keep, and their promise is fast. If you're hungry, McDonald's provides you a burger very, very fast. And you know how they measure speed? Did you know earlier they had that sand clock? Yeah, they had the sand clock. Yeah, but you think that's the only way they measure speed. You know, internally how they measure speed? They say that I'm sitting wherever I'm sitting. Suppose we are sitting here. I'm sitting in my office or at my home, and I feel hungry and I want to have a burger. How much time does it take from the location in which I am and I want to have a burger till the time I reach a McDonald's location? How much time does it take? And they locate their McDonald's outlets in such a way that it doesn't take a lot of time. So the way they measure is from a customer's perspective. So it's not only when you enter a store and then how much time does it take. It's wherever you are, from when I got hungry, how much time does it take to go to a McDonald's outlet and then have that burger. So when you create KPIs, think from a customer's perspective, and that's what we advise our clients also. How do you create KPIs from a customer's perspective? It's a busy slide, but I'll not get into a lot of details. Now, once we have a promise, a lot of companies have a promise to their clients. Now you have to live up to those promises with the right processes and systems. Then you have operational processes, you have customer-facing processes, which is sales, marketing, and service, and you have innovation processes that build new products and new capabilities. So these processes are the ones that will deliver the promise that you have made to the clients. Now, if I ask you, we took an example of these airlines. One competed on cost, one competed on speed, one competed on luxury. Do you think all the airlines, all these three different airline companies, their processes are the same? Why? See, it's the same aircraft. It's either a Boeing or an Airbus. It's the same airports. They land in the same airport. They don't have their own airports, right? It's access to the same set of people. But why do their processes need to be different then? A lot of routine processes might be the same, but the strategic processes, and strategy for us means differentiation. What differentiates them from the others, those processes are different. So if somebody competes on cost, all their processes are to reduce cost. So they'll buy cheap, they will sell cheap. So everything is cheaper. If you're competing on speed, all the processes and policies are to make speed happen. Have you seen Formula One? When the car comes to the pit stop, in how many seconds do they change the tires? 8 to 9 seconds. 8 to 2 seconds. 3 to 2 seconds. Okay. So whatever, they do it in seconds. If you and I have to change our car tires, an hour. Yes. So, so my promise to my wife is not that I'll get this car up and running in a few seconds. She is ready to wait for an hour. So I will change my tire, or I don't know how to change. I'll go to a garage and get it changed. But in a Formula One, the promise of the engineering staff to the driver is, if you come to the pit stop, we will ensure that you spend as minimum time as possible. So they design capabilities, systems and processes to adhere to that promise. So that's why, although the airline companies, and we took an example of airline companies, the aircrafts are the same, the airports are the same, but their processes are different. And they are different because they need to deliver to a different promise to each of their customers. So don't, so sometimes benchmarking is a problem. Have you heard of benchmarking? I go and benchmark. So I am a Tata Motors and I want to benchmark my company with Toyota. Is that fair? Toyota's promise to its customers is different. Tata Motors' promise to its customers is different. So if you benchmark your processes to their processes, it's not fair. But routine operational processes, you can still go ahead and benchmark. But strategic processes, you can't, or you should not. So we looked at mission, vision, values, financial goals, promise to the customers, and then how processes have to deliver to that particular promise. There are more intangible things that are extremely important on organizations. The intangible stuff is yes. Are humans important? Yes. So human capital and skills are extremely important in organizations. IT is important. We had a detailed lecture on what technology is changing and how it's changing, and that's important. And also what we call as organization capital. There are four things there. Leadership. Is leadership in organization important? Is culture important? Is alignment and teamwork important? So if you have so many people here, and I'm told 800 people can fit in this auditorium, and if we have a common and shared mission, all 800 people should be aligned to a common and shared vision. So alignment is extremely important, and teamwork is extremely key. Whether it's a game of cricket or football or an organization, teamwork is extremely important, and it's important that we start measuring these things. As an example, in IT, there are various IT applications. Is IT relevant to most of you here? Yes. There are various types of applications, and I heard the previous speaker talking about analytical applications. So analytical is also part of it. But one key thing is we always need to identify what is that IT system that will transform the way my business will be done. Since we are on the topic of airlines, what is that IT application that has transformed airlines in the recent few months or years? What IT application has transformed the airline companies? Sorry? Booking system. There was a time when we had to go to an agent to buy a ticket, and today we can actually buy a cheapest ticket from anywhere to anywhere, sitting. Do most of you use things like Make My Trip and ClearTrip? If you buy your tickets, yes. So ticketing, the way ticketing is being done, IT has actually transformed it. In the banking industry, any such transformation that you've seen by IT? Mobile banking? Yes. Have you heard that I can send money from my mobile to your mobile? Send me. Prove it. Prove it. You want balance nahi hai? Yes. Do you know Google Glass is also going to help you banking? Yeah, you don't need to walk into a branch, you can have a virtual branch. Yeah, do you know iWatch? You can do banking through wearables. Yeah, so technology is actually changing. Have you heard of SMAC technologies? Yeah, you heard of SMAC. Okay, S is social media, M is mobility, A is analytics, and C is cloud. And you heard all that. So technology plays an important role in transformation. Then is the skills. We come up with something called the skills readiness index of an organization. How ready the organization is in terms of their human capital. Less people paid more will actually reduce your salary or a wage cost. So instead of hiring people with less wages, you can hire people with the right skills, can give them higher wages. Actually, your wage cost will be lesser. In terms of leadership, I asked some of your professors here, where is Bala sir? I wanted to meet him. So they said he's unwell, so he's not here. But I'm seeing, even in his absence, things work very well. Yeah? With the same level of discipline. The most effective measure of leadership is the performance of the team in his absence. So do you have a great leader? Yeah? Let's clap for him again. Teamwork. How important teamwork is. When we dream alone, it remains a dream. But when we dream together, it's the beginning of a new reality. Nothing can be done only alone. Okay? It's important to achieve our dreams with collaboration and teamwork, and that's extremely important. And in organizations, there's a challenge. I don't know whether it happens in educational institutes, but in private sector organizations, it's a huge challenge. Now I want to ask you one critical thing. Maybe you'll give me the right answer because most of you are students here. But if you have to answer me a question, in companies, which is a more difficult thing to happen? If I ask you a question, people are not ready to share knowledge, or is it that people are not ready to learn? Which is a more bigger problem? Sharing? People don't share. Why don't they share? Okay, they want to move up faster because if I keep knowledge to myself, what happens? What happens? I move up the ladder faster. So there is a myth that in organizations, people don't want to share. And I'm calling it a myth. Okay? You're saying, so my proposition or my hypothesis is that in organizations or anywhere in the world, it is actually, there is a dearth of learners. There is a clear dearth of learners. Sharers are there. Now let's take an example, a live example here. It's 8:30 and we have 800 people sitting here to do what? To learn? To learn. Who's learning, you or me? Both. Yeah, but I know in the process of learning you also share, but what I'm saying is you have actually come here to listen to leaders from the industry to learn. And who has come here to share? Okay, but I accept that I also learn in the process. Okay, so, but so the question I'm trying to ask is, and find an answer is, if I have 800 people to listen to me, what happens to my ego? Do I have an ego boost? Yes. So when people are ready to listen to me, do you know that you have actually made it easy for me to share? when you say that I'm here sitting at 8:30 in the night, and what you're basically saying is, I don't know enough and I want to learn. So what you're doing to your ego? You are lowering your ego. And which is a more difficult task? Yes. To go to someone, especially somebody who's a junior, you know, in this case, you are forced to listen to me. Correct? No, let's be very frank. So, but if you go to someone and tell that person, you know what, you think you know a lot in this subject? Kuch bata, let me challenge you. Let me tell me what you know about it. Do you think that person will share? Yeah, with this ego? But if I have a guru-shishya relationship, if I have a relationship where it's a true guru-shishya, where it doesn't matter whether that person is junior to me or my friend, I actually go and say, you know what, in this subject, I don't know much. Can I be your disciple? Can I learn from you? I really respect you for your knowledge. Will you please teach me? I will be your disciple for the next few months. Do you think that person will share? So, the onus of learning is on the sharer or on the learner? It's on the learner. If you have to make knowledge happen, the onus is on the learner. If the learner can lower the ego, sharing will automatically happen. So in today's discussion, for the entire day, for yesterday, today and tomorrow, you are the people who have lowered your ego. Some of the professors here are elder to me. So they are the ones who have lowered the ego and said, we're going to listen to all these people and learn from them. So I think you should clap for yourselves. So that's why you call it a learning organization. You don't call it a sharing organization. So Sachin Tendulkar says he's a guru of cricket or he's a student of cricket. Correct? So he, even at this age, even after retirement, he says, I'm a student of cricket. So he's still learning. So onus is always on learning. So if you had this myth that people don't share, you know how to make them share. What do you have to do? Kneel down on your knees, okay, and say, I don't know enough, please teach me. Okay? But if you go and say, tu bata teko kya aata hai? That guy will say, go to hell. Correct? Yes. Yeah, I'll just skip some of these slides. So the last thing is that, you know, I don't know if you had an opportunity to see any of Neeland's ads. This is the ad that actually went out to CEOs worldwide. It actually said, we are, if you are torn by business complexities inside and outside your organization, you can bank on Neeland. Nihil is a Latin word. In Latin, it means nothing. So if you have to create something, it has to be out of a state of zeroness or nothingness. Okay, India, I think, invented the zero. If we can go in a state of zeroness, a lot of things are possible. Okay, you and I know that this is a glass. Okay, but for a child who is just born or who's a few years old, he doesn't know it's a glass. So he has the capability to reinvent this thing into anything because he is grounded. He is grounded to a state of nothingness or zeroness. Okay? आपने कभी किसी को बोलते हुए सुना है धरती पे आ जाओ, क्यों इतना उड़ रहे हो? हाँ? तो धरती पे आ जाओ means get to a state of zeroness or nothingness. So what we do is when we go and consult to our clients, we help them to come to a state of that nothingness, which is what nihilance means. And we also go to a state of nothingness because in that state, a lot of new possibilities can happen. Because our promise to our clients is that we help them manage change and transformation, and that can only happen when we look at the future as a possibility. And especially, it's very difficult to predict the future. The only way to predict the future is to create one. Okay, that's the only way to predict the future. Thank you. So I'm sure you have no questions because you all want to go back home.
Good evening, sir.
Good evening.
Sir, in the starting of your presentation, I heard that you have been a mentor for knowledge management.
Yes.
So, sir, I'd basically like you to ask two questions. KM as a career and KM in future.
Correct. Well, I don't know if KM as a career is a great career. So, a lot of organizations today have a role called a Chief Knowledge Officer, or a Chief Innovation Officer, or a Chief Intellectual Officer. If you hear Mr. Modi speak, who's our Prime Minister, he has dismantled the Planning Commission. In fact, he wants to convert the Planning Commission into something more innovative in the future. So innovation, knowledge and learning, and Chief Learning Officer is also one of the words. Innovation, knowledge and learning are becoming extremely important subjects in organizations and in management schools and in PhDs. So it's still a management school thesis subject. We are still not very clear about how do we build those learning organizations. So if you're passionate about the subject, there's a huge opportunity because organizations are creating, and that capability to learn helps organizations to innovate. Now the future is, if every organization has to innovate, knowledge becomes an extremely important subject. But the key thing for knowledge is that if I ask you a question, a counter question, which is a more difficult task, learning or unlearning? So for me to learn new things, I need to unlearn older ways of doing things. So sometimes I say, you know, you see my bald head, and I go to clients and I claim that I have a lot of experience. But I tell my clients very frankly that this lot of experience sometimes is a problem, because I have seen the world in the past and I can tell you what has not worked, what has worked, and I can tell you it'll never work, etc. But that's a problem, because I'm coming from the past. Okay, so I have to unlearn those older ways. And if you really learn newer things, you know, get youngsters such as yours, because you all have bubbling ideas and you'll have these new ideas without the past actually driving you. So the subject is good. If you're passionate about the subject, most good and great organizations would have that role, and you can aspire to be in that role.